All right, welcome back, Improvement Nerds. I'm excited you're here for another deep dive, and once again, we're joined by Jim Benson. If you caught our last episode together, you'll remember how we nerded out about personal Kanban, how visualizing work and limiting WIP aren't just productivity tricks, but ways to help us think, focus, and feel better about the work we do. That conversation really resonated. Today, we're taking it a bit further. We're talking not just about how we work, but why, and what it looks like to design systems that make work better for people. We'll dig into connecting strategy to action, thriving among uncertainty, and how leaders can use Lean and Kanban to build cultures of trust and collaboration. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I recommend starting there. But even if you're jumping in fresh, you'll probably hear me learning right alongside of you. So let's dive in as we wage war on bad processes. And welcome back, Jim Benson. All right, welcome back, Improvement Nerds. We are here once again with Jim Benson. If you've listened to our previous podcast with him, you will know that we have nerded out about personal Kanban, and it was just a really, really great discussion, and decided to bring him back on to discover more about what he has to say. I feel like how it ended was super touching, and really what we're talking about here is not just tool sets, but different ways to work so that we can make work better for people and make the desired outcomes better for people as well, in ways that we can use that has just an impact in our work, in our community, and for ourselves to free us up emotionally to be able to do better things. We touched on personal Kanban. If you haven't listened to that episode, I would welcome you to listen to that and join us in this conversation today, as you will probably hear me learn if you listen close enough to your speakers. Jim is joining us again, and he is going to take the conversation to a deeper level, and I am going to be in a state of discovery. So I will be learning along with everybody that's listening in real time. But I would like to first welcome Jim and ask him to maybe just give us a little recap if someone hasn't heard our previous episode on what is Kanban, what is personal Kanban at a very high level. Then what is the vision? How would you like to shape this conversation? So welcome, Jim.
Okay. So at the highest possible level, if you don't visualize your work, you can't manage it. It is too easy for work to build up, for you to have too many things to do and have too many things in flight. And so Kanban and personal Kanban for people who are working, if you've ever used Trello or Asana or things like that, that is trying to be a Kanban. But there are 2 rules to personal Kanban: visualize your work. And the second is limit your work in progress. And we want to do the first because, as I said, you can't manage what you can't see. And we want to do the second because if you aren't limiting your work in progress, then you're going to be doing too much as a matter of course, and then you are not going to achieve flow. And so ultimately, we want to have a flow of work, but we also want to have psychological flow where you feel comfortable with the work you're doing. You're able to focus it. You're able to finish it in a way that you are professionally satisfied with. And then that work is done. The general structure of any one of these Kanban boards is that you have the stuff you haven't started yet, the stuff you're working on, and then the stuff you have finished working on presently. And we tend to call those areas the options area, the doing area, and the done area. And in the options, you're putting everything you could be doing. And the reason that they're options is because you want to pull those into an active state when they're ready, when you can finish them, when the people are available for you to work with, when the work actually needs to be started. Starting work too soon means that you let it sit. When you let it sit, you forget what you're doing. When you forget what you're doing, you have to go back and relearn, which means you get context switching penalties. Also, if you have too many things that you're doing, you run afoul of something called the Zeigarnik, which says that when you start doing a task, you don't stop thinking about it until it's done. And the problem with that is if you have several complicated tasks that involve other people, which most of your tasks probably are, then all of the things about that task are stuck in your head. So the point of the Kanban, and I do go on longer about this in the other one, is to be able to get something from the not started state all the way to the completed state in a way that you are professionally satisfied with. And then when it is completed, to understand that that's not the end of your job. It means that you've stopped the value production on that, but you haven't stopped monitoring it or checking it for continued improvement or things like that.
Thank you for the refresher. again, if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to the first episode if you want a deeper understanding of Kanban, personal Kanban. I know just in the short time that I've been talking to you that you're always thinking of new ways and you're iterating upon, but where does Jim Benson see maybe the future of Kanban, or how does this fit within a larger system of work? What are the other things that we need to be paying attention to right now?
Oh, there's so many. So I will pick an arbitrary starting point. When people are working together, so in my book, The Collaboration Equation, I talk about the equation itself is individuals in teams create value. Even if the team is just you and your customer, that's still a team, and you need both actors to work together. And where things fall apart is where things are poorly communicated. And why we do lean or agile or PMI or anything else is we are trying to navigate the information needs of different stakeholders at any given point in time. And for me, the thing that hasn't been done in any of the systems that are out right now is a focus on what is it that we as individual team members and as a team as a whole need in order to get our work done. What do we need? What information do we need? What direction do we need to get our work done? So ultimately, what a Kanban or any other visual system that we use, an A3, fishbone diagram, a heat map, or something you invent on your own, please invent things on your own. But each of those visualizations needs to be telling us in real time, what are we want to be doing? And how is what we want to be doing changing as it contacts reality? And right now, the rate of change is bewilderingly fast. AI, new HR rules, the political state of the world in general, everything about how we do business is changing, not just on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis. And more than ever, we need these visual controls to be able to say, here's what we as a group have agreed to do. And then here are the triggers saying, warning, this thing is either no relevant or it's morphed into something else because of some change in our environment. And so if you thought change was hard to manage before, now it's like ridiculously hard to manage. And if we don't, then we're just always going to be frustrated and we're going to give up. And that's not, for me, the right alternative. So we try and put Kanbans in what we call a mission control center or an Obeya, where there's a variety of different visualizations that allow people to work in real time. It's not a giant room that's a dashboard. It's actually a work room where you're actually doing the work.
Yeah, I just love the concept of Obeya. I've worked in a couple Obeyas myself. And I guess for the listeners that may not know, Obeya is a Japanese word that means war room, or it's generally a place where we would get together and see how we're delivering strategy all the way to the work items that we're doing,
Mhm.
collaborate inside that room. So would love to have more space, and maybe companies have more space now to create Obeyas.
Because we send everybody home. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can be virtual too. Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear you talking about, we talked about Kanban and how work flows maybe from column to column, from inception to completion, which is a great mechanism to, like you said, limit the whip,
Mhm.
and really get the work done in an efficient way. But are we getting the right work done?
Yeah.
And I feel like what you're saying is you're connecting this, and I've done this in the past too, not in Obeya, but through different visual management boards, physically, maybe out on the shop floor, where we're taking the GOST structure of goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics, and we're placing the goals up on a board, and then we have the objectives there. We're doing some root cause analysis that's very
Mhm.
visual. That sets off some strategy that is like a higher level A3. And then
Mhm.
more tactical, or the parent-child relationship, the children are running through maybe that Kanban style of board. So then we can see how we're rolling these tactics through, and we can look at our cycle times on those tactics. Are we
Mhm.
improving the rate at which we improve and getting stuff done? But it's a very visual thing to where anybody from the highest level of the executive can come and look at and say, you know what? the frontline staff is delivering on our strategy.
Mhm.
Here's the tactics, and they align. And the frontline staff are then connected with the goal setting piece of it, and they understand what the goals are. So many times in organizations, we see the disconnect, right? So there's this great strategy planning that's happening, but the deployment piece is just not there. So they have a great plan that sits in a room, and on the other side of that, you go out to the frontline staff and you ask them, well, what are the goals that we're working on here? And they're just disconnected.
I have no idea, man. And the reason is because, well, first off, strategy is often not developed collaboratively. So you're already not making use of the thoughts and input of all of the people in the company. But then second, the strategy is conveyed through a game of telephone or just through vague documents saying this is our strategy for this quarter. And it's like 12 words. And people, I have no idea how that relates to me updating databases. So whatever. So we try and do a few things. We'll have, like you said, like a GOS thing or an X matrix. And the X matrix in there is sitting up the whole time and it's reminding people these are the objectives or these are the aspirations, these are the strategies, the tactics that we're taking on. Those tactics become projects, those projects become Kanbans. The tickets on the Kanbans then relate back to the dots in the X matrix. And then what we're doing is we're removing those horizontal layers of power distance, and you will get things like a president or a vice president or a CEO or a CTO walking into a team's Obeya, looking around, being able to see a direct linkage between the current strategies and what they're actually doing. And then they have a conversation with them based on information and not tell me what you're doing. Because tell me what you're doing or present to me where you are is always going to get you the rosiest interpretation of what's happening. But if they walk into a Obeya, they're going to see we're solving these problems, we're doing this, but they're also going to see we solved these problems. We did this other work. And so that means that problems are no longer weaknesses. They're actually part of actually doing the work. And then the Cs or the VPs can come in and actually be grateful that those problems are there and not resentful or questioning. And that just creates the best conversations ever.
Yeah, I agree. And I love an X matrix. My example I was just given was absent of an X matrix, but still trying to do the intentional thing that you just said and connect the dots. And it's super powerful. In the way that we've seen this executed is to have the C suite come to where these boards are and have the front lines talk about what they're doing
Mhm.
and how they're advancing work. I think that's inspiring for any executive. And it's also inspiring for the frontline worker to be placed in front of the executives. You don't have the mid-level management now having to do a PowerPoint report out or whatever. You have the frontline workers actually say, here's what we're doing. And really creating visibility, creating career tracks, even just by presenting in front of leadership, I think is powerful. Doing that in Obeya and having an X matrix is, I think, ideal. I love the X matrix and how it works.
Mhm.
And I think, though, you can't just place an X matrix in front of someone without them going a little bit cross-eyed.
Yes, absolutely.
It's magic. I seen pictures that were in the 80s in the mall. You just have to kind of stare at it. And then once you get it and you see it and you understand it, you're like, why aren't we doing the X matrix for everything, right?
Yeah.
Have a level 1 plan, a level 2 plan, seeing how it all connects. I think that's the greatest thing if you can coach through that X matrix.
And the beauty there is that so previously, middle management would have given a PowerPoint presentation with no participation from anybody else. And then even if they reviewed it. And then when Cs asked the middle management folks what, they asked them questions, they would get answers back saying, I don't know, or I'll check on that, or things like that, which is the same thing as saying, I have failed you. And so if you can't get the information you want when you want it, even if somebody says, I'll go get that for you, at that moment, it's an information delivery failure. And it's not an interesting conversation for the Cs. And so then they begin to distrust the team and middle management. If middle management is able to deliver that same presentation in the Obeya with one or more team members, then I don't know becomes, hey, can you give some detail on this, Susan? And then Susan's like, yeah, we did this, or this happened, or this is why that happened. So the conversation then becomes something that can be the pull of information from the customer, being the C levels, is immediately providable by the people doing the work.
That's the secret sauce. It's a journey like everything else is, and companies need to mature on their journey. I just see connecting that strategy down to tactics, everything working together, some good catch ball happening, conversations happening. I would say that's a level 5 on the maturity matrix. And maybe just using the Kanban could be a level 1 or level 2. Or how do you see the growth of this and expand maturity and level of understanding within an organization?
Well, there's this tendency to view maturity models as you climb some rungs and then you end up at the top floor and then you go have a drink. And what actually happens is the maturity models are more like bungee jumping. And where you go and then you just bounce up and down a lot. So just always remember that the human beings, when they interact, are going to bring their human beinginess with them. And AI just makes this worse because it's even more unpredictable than people. But when people start working together, they will adopt different tools when they're ready to adopt those tools. And some of them will require, if not more maturity, at least more operational understanding. But that operational understanding itself is a moving target. So in complexity science, you go from very simple things to very complicated to very complex to chaotic. And it's a circle. And the clear or simple things are right next to chaos because usually it's the failure of simple things like the inability to get potable water that cause chaos, right? So one day you have a house, then a hurricane knocks it over, and then you're in chaos. Previous, the house was a simple thing. So this happens with teams all the time where they will set up very mature systems, and then those systems will end up coming into contact with a reality that negates those systems. And then we will blame the team or we will blame project managers for this, but this is literally something that happens in the face of change. So in order to deal with that, for me, it's like the highest level of maturity is being able to deal with what happens when your definition of maturity changes overnight. So when you run into a complex situation, what does your team or your company do? Do you go make a big planning effort around it, or do you force people to prove the business need for it? Or have you already visualized the system and therefore you can visualize the failure in a way where it makes the response to that, even if you don't know how to respond, the act of responding is immediately apparent. So those triggers of knowing when your maturity level has fallen out from under you, that for me is the ultimate maturity.
How do you move, especially maybe at the executive level, C level, how do you move those groups of people to that understanding?
So I'll answer that with a story about Turner Construction. So Turner's old CEO, Peter Davern, decided with the help of their chief innovation officer, Jim Barrett, that they wanted to make a lean organization or they wanted to have more lean ideals in the organization. So as part of an LEI team, we show up to work on that. And the first thing that Jim Barrett tells us is there's more work here to handle. This is a target rich environment. The CEO, Peter, went to everybody else in the company and said, I want you to be lean because I don't want huge punch lists on projects, because I want safer projects where the recordable injury rate is much less, because I want to have higher retention in the company, and I want people to love living and working at Turner. And he meant it. He really meant it. So Peter didn't understand from a box of rocks what lean was, but he understood the goals of what lean could deliver and then gave people the room to implement through the through the rubric of lean, gave them the ability to implement those things. And luckily for him, he had several layers of management underneath him. It's like by no means missing managers, but between like guys like Charlie Murphy and Charlie Whitney and Tom Stahovia and other people that were in the company, they actively pushed these ideals. And then what happened was we had to find project executives on each existing project or new project that would actually accept them themselves and then be accepting that we couldn't change the entire org. And then through that, we were able to set up a surprising number of extremely successful projects. And when I say project at Turner, it means like $1 billion plus. This isn't like we're going to change this Excel spreadsheet. This is like stereo. This is more than most companies ever see in their entire lifespan. Their projects are. And each project is incredibly involved, incredibly politically sensitive, incredibly, et cetera. And so we were able to build successful situations. And then we were able to go back to the more hesitant executives and say, these are the 20 things that we did. Which ones of these would you like to apply? We have now spun up a lean support team in Turner, and they can come and they can help you do the ones you want. So what we didn't do is rewrite the project management handbook and say, you have to do these things. What we did do is we provided the project executives with options that they were comfortable with under the assumption that some would never change, some would gradually change, and some would quickly change when provided with these success stories.
That's interesting. I'm just trying to think back on my personal experience in dealing with C-suite, mid-sized companies, or even very large nationwide companies where the CEO either didn't have any familiarity with lean at all, or
Mhm.
came from another organization that did do lean, but doesn't understand lean. It just knows that this is the right thing to do, right?
Mhm.
In both cases, it seems to make sense to get the buy-in and you create a small space to demonstrate the value of it. And in your case, it sounds like a project.
Yep.
Provide a small sample and then hopefully you get enough innovators and early adopters to move the culture of the
Mhm.
organization towards adopting maybe a better way of doing things.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is that if you do go through and look, you will see that almost every project in New York has a Kanban on the wall, even if they don't know what it's called now. And they all have a timeline view and a couple of other things. So every project now builds out a rudiment of Obeya, even if they don't use it as deeply as I would like them to. So there is definitely impact across the board from that. The one thing that I just want to say, like, about Peter as a person is that I found that Peter was curious about the specifics of lean, and in the end, in a very healthy way, understood that he didn't have to be a lean expert. But what he did have to do was engage in two things that he urged everybody else in the company to engage in, which is one was what Turner called active caring, which is you need to care about your colleagues, the project, the customer, et cetera. And the two was you needed to build a right environment. And I always felt that Peter led by example when he was doing that, even if he personally couldn't care how an A3 was done or the specifics of lean or any of these adjacent tools. You know, we use plenty of liberating structures, game storming, all sorts of things in Turner to build for each different project the operating system for that project that met the needs of the people that were there and the interactions that they had with that particular customer. I've never seen a company before that had such a different experience on each project site. And it was quite beautiful, actually, just to watch how the people at Turner did care for each other in such a high charged environment.
Yeah, as probably a lot of our audience knows, we have a lot of lean listeners, and really lean's built on a foundation of respect for people and continuous improvement. So I think if you have the mindset of respecting the people in the organization and wanting to get better, wanting to improve, you have two good pillars there to layer in, even if you don't have a full understanding. It's going to get you headed in the right direction. Now, there's so many
Right.
options. This might be an off the wall question or maybe too philosophical, but there's many ways to arrive. And we have lean out there. We have Six Sigma,
Mhm.
as traditional project management, and maybe not one way it is the way, or
Yeah.
there's a lot of project management tools now that are integrating maybe more of the lean concepts within their
Mhm.
software. Are we seeing a trend of the more traditional project management going from waterfall to more agile to more lean to,
Oh, I
or
think we're seeing serious recidivism. I think that we're going back to traditional top-down power structures, and that the prevailing rhetoric right now is one entirely of top-down command and control and inefficient systems of that. Both in the lean world and in the agile world, I'm engaged in multiple groups that are all trying to figure out what the future of lean and agile are. And part of the issue with both of them is that the bodies of knowledge have not allowed themselves to adequately evolve over time. So when you have an idea, so when Kanban was first introduced, we had a conference in Antwerp, in Belgium, and my topic at that conference to speak on was Scrum sucks, Kanban will suck too, and it's your fault. And in this case, it was like a whole building full of early adopters for Kanban. And what happens is an idea starts, or a body of knowledge starts out, and it's expansive. There's all these things you can add to it. And then as you add more and more, it becomes diffuse. And then there is a movement by people to limit the amount of new things brought in so that you can teach it as a thing. So you can get your Scrum Master certification, or you can get your PMP or something like that. And what we find over and over again is that these are all models, and all models are wrong and some are useful. So Kanban is a model, Scrum is a model, Lean is a model, Six Sigma is a model. They're all unbelievably useful, but all of them also they're not a panacea. They don't solve all the problems. And so as continuous improvements nerds, our job is to go out and keep grabbing new ideas from biomimicry or from plasticity, or, whatever it might be. There's all these models out there that come back to the only thing that project management is really about, and that's interaction. How do human beings with goals interact with each other, with the customer, with the ability to get things done, with the tools that you have available, with the tools you wish you had, with decisions you agree with decisions you don't agree with? How do we navigate that structure, that situation, that world in a way that keeps us focused on the work and doesn't keep us focused on whether we're lean or agile or Kanban-y? We want to do the right work at the right time and get it done in a way that we're proud of. And so for me, the way that this all needs to evolve is that we've got the Jim Womack recipe book. We've got the John Shook recipe book. We've got the Schwaber recipe book. We've got the Benson recipe book. We've got the Anderson recipe book. We've got all these recipe books. It doesn't mean you only have to eat what's in that book. If I go off and buy like Madhur Jaffrey's book, I don't have to just make Madhur Jaffrey food, And so we need, as CI people, to start to understand that our job is to care for the team and the end result of that team. And for me, the big rules are, can you see it to manage it? Are people doing an amount of work that they can handle? And have you built a system with a rule that they agreed to or built themselves? And if you have that, I don't care what's in it. I haven't seen a team work very well without something that looks like a Kanban, but I've seen Kanbans drawn like targets, where things move from the outside circles to the inside circles. I've seen Kanbans built like Mobius strips, where things travel around and around and around and around in the board. I've seen one group that had what they called the washing machine in the middle, where there was like all these recursive processes that happened in the middle, and then magically the clothes were done at some point. Your way of working might be iterative. It might be straight up flow, but it more than likely moves between the two. And here's my sermon for the day, I guess. That's the maturity that we need. Is, are we paying enough attention to ourselves and the work that we're doing to understand when the way that we're doing that work doesn't match the way that work needs to be done?
Yeah, it's the ability to be able to shift modalities or whatever we're doing to match that work. This is, I gotta say, Jim, this is a very nerdy conversation.
So I'm hoping that there was like lots of C-level people who were like, you need to come to Indianapolis right now and work with us, because there's a couple of restaurants I am dying to hit in Indy. So
in Indy, all right. Yes, hopefully someone will pick us up and we can design stuff to make the work better for the people. I keep saying that over and over. It sounds like you're saying the same thing. It's meeting the needs of the people. It's being flexible.
Yeah.
It's shifting the modalities. It's picking what works, getting the right recipe.
Hmm.
So bringing it back to food and the restaurants in Indianapolis. Do you have a menu of things that you can eat? And it's a matter of getting
Hmm.
that works for Mark or works for Jim.
And I like that even more because some companies have definite food allergies. So if you go into some companies and you say, I'm going to try this agile thing, they will garrot you. They will send you packing. So there are companies that we've gone into, we've created positive change and they've instantly reverted to the old way of working because it upset certain things within the company. And then later on, as they've figured out how to ingest that thing, they've gone back and done it sometimes years and years later. So understand that when, as continuous improvement people, when we go in and work with groups, right now, the word Obeya or the word Kaizen or, iterations or Scrum or safe, a lot of these words themselves are toxic, even if the ideas are not. And it might become your job to figure out how to hide the medicine in the applesauce for the companies that you're working with or your clients, and not to double down and say, no, I want you to, no, I want you to, because then that's just going to be a political battle between you and their fears, as opposed to you actually satisfying their needs.
That's perfect. We're getting close to the end of our episode number 2. I don't know if you can come back for episode 3, 4, 5, 6. But is there anything that I haven't asked you that's burning that you would like to get out to the audience?
I guess the big thing, and I kind of mentioned it with just the general visualization and stuff, is that right now, the global market for continuous improvement is under attack. And people in OpEx, CI, Agile, Lean, whatever the group is called, we are having a hard time maintaining our jobs. And one of the things that we have been as a species, as a continuous improvement race, that we've been really bad at doing is navigating power and understanding what the letters ROI mean. So, what I want to immediately say to anybody listening to this call today is if that sounds like you, or if you're in OpEx, I will say right now, you are likely in danger and that you need to figure out what information the people who would be making those decisions need and what information they're asking for. The delta between the two of those, and then figure out crafty ways to get the information they really need. Because what they'll be asking for is like, how much did this save me? And you can't prove a negative. So you can't say I did this A3 and therefore we saved this much money. You can lie or you can make a projection, but in general, you can't do that. But what you can do is involve them as much as possible in the day-to-day activities of continuous improvement so that they can see the struggles that you are finding, the problems that you are solving, and the conversations that you're having to make those solutions real. And when they start to understand those needs and the narrative behind that, you will get tremendously more support than you will if you just go back and make up some numbers because they can always just disbelieve the numbers.
Yeah, we can get numbers to say anything we want if we tried hard enough. I totally agree with the value that you just articulated. So, done that in the past. Again, I think we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, bringing the executive level and the frontline staff together, knowing that everyone's rowing in the same direction. Your retention rates are steady because people are engaged in their work and they're making improvements. They're involved in the process. That is, of course, you can attach some hard costs to retention or something, but seeing the workforce connected to the ultimate strategy, seeing the innovation, the ideas of the people closest to the work, really helping to push the company forward is something that I don't know if other functional areas of the business are doing that. And it is a way to really demonstrate value. If you're in CI, if you're in process improvement right now, I agree with Jim that this is a great way to demonstrate value for the times that we're in. So let's stay connected as a network of people. who have these good intentions. I know here in the Indianapolis area, there are groups of CI people that are expanding, and we're always looking out and placing new posts that are coming up and new jobs. So we need to stay together as a community to, one, keep the community going, and two, to see what kind of direction that we need to shift in to adapt, to Jim's point earlier. So I'm glad that we've had this conversation today. I've learned a lot. Like I said, I knew I would coming into this, and I think we're going to talk more and continue this relationship. How can those that are listening to this podcast reach you?
So I am always at modusinstitute.com, MODUS institute.com. I'm also Jim Benson, like LinkedIn/Jim Benson on LinkedIn. So I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn because I got that. And then lastly, our Tony Ann DiMaria and my newsletter at Substack is humanework.substack.com. And we have been criticized recently by some of our business consultants ourselves for putting too much value into our newsletter. So if you would like too much value, come check out our newsletter, and that is there for you as well.
All right. Again, Jim, just thank you for taking your time out today to talk with us, to be on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Personally, I found it edifying. I know our listeners will find it edifying as well. And thank you again.
This was awesome. Thank you, Mark.
And that wraps up another great conversation here on the Improvement Nerds podcast. A huge thanks to Jim Benson for joining us once again and taking us even deeper into what it means to make work truly humane, not just efficient, but meaningful. I love the reminder that the tools, whether it's Kanban, A3, X-Matrices, are only as powerful as the respect and collaboration behind them. If you haven't listened to our first episode together, definitely go back and check that one out. It sets the stage for everything we explored today. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with a fellow improvement nerd who's out there waging war on bad processes right alongside us. Until next time, keep improving, keep learning, keep nerding out, and remember to always leave your processes better than you found them.